Hi, everyone. Welcome to another discovery session with Efficiency Canada and Friends. I'm Natalie Irwin, Director of Stakeholder Engagement here at Efficiency Canada, located in Ottawa, which is also the unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. Before we get started, a reminder to everyone that our guest speaker will present for approximately 20 minutes, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to type in throughout the presentation, but we're not going to get to the Q&As until the end. You can also raise your hand and I will unmute you and you can ask your question directly. We had a few people last week be brave and ask their own questions. We do have a hard stop at 12:45 p.m. Eastern time so that everyone can finish their lunch, breakfast, afternoon snack, or morning tea, depending on where you are in the country, or sometimes over the world as well. So without further ado, I am pleased to welcome our friend and guest speaker, Chris Ballard, here today, CEO of Pacifist Canada. He's going to speak about the retrofit challenge Canada has and the need to bring all players to the table to find a common solution. I'm looking forward to this one, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Well, delighted to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity to partner with Efficiency Canada. And you know, we're big supporters of Efficiency Canada, so pleased to be here. So, as Natalie said, today's discussion is about the Retrofit Challenge, Canada's emerging pathway for building decarbonization. But before I go too far, a little bit about, if you don't know about Pacifist Canada. We're a membership-based social enterprise. We do a lot of advocacy work with government and industry, and really pleased to support the work that Efficiency Canada is doing. We're a big fan of all that they're doing. We provide education and professional development services. We offer technical services, and we have members and staff and instructors located all across Canada. Our mission is to make zero emission buildings known and adopted by government, industry, and the public. We support government and industry in the transition to high performance buildings, and we do that through education, certification, and policy development. And we promote the Pacifist Institute building standard while working collaboratively with all those who seek science-based zero emissions buildings. Let's start by looking at some of the global and national impacts that we see. You know, we know that nationally, 501 Canadian municipalities have declared a climate emergency. Many of them are coming to us and saying, okay, a couple of years have gone by, now what? What should we be doing? So we talk to them about the impact of buildings in their environment, and specifically how they need to push deep energy retrofits, especially if they have towers in their jurisdiction. You know, some of the other things that Canada faces that, you know, that's really driving or should be driving a lot of what we're doing, besides the world being on fire and us having to address climate change, you know, we face punishing taxes on exports unless we get our Climate Change Act together. You know, both the EU and the US are floating ideas about how to punish those countries that don't get their act together. And although Canada is doing some really good things, we need to do a lot more of them. So climate change represents both a challenge and an immense opportunity, we believe. You know, it will, if done correctly, stimulate the largest restructuring of our economy since World War II. That shouldn't be restricting, it should be restructuring of our economy since World War II. And it presents a real opportunity if we play our cards right, a real opportunity to make people's lives better through promoting a just transition, to creating better housing and better mental and physical health because of better housing, and creating more, better, and more meaningful jobs and careers. So yes, the climate crisis is real, and it's here in Canada. It's been here in Canada for over 25 years from my own personal experience. We just haven't noticed it until recently. You know, 600 people died because of the heat dome in BC, severe grain busting drought in central Canada, incredible fires, forest fires in Northern Ontario and BC. The list goes on, but people are paying attention now. So here's what we do. So Passive House Canada, I mentioned earlier, we do certifications, we certify buildings, we certify professionals in the building industry, every architects, engineers, tradespeople, and we certify Passive House components. So really high performing components that need to go into high performance buildings and structures. We have a number of certifications that we give to structures. We have everything from low energy all the way up to the Passive House Premium that addresses embodied carbon, and along the retrofits, because that's what we're focusing on today, a number of retrofit standards as well. And Passive House International has been working on retrofits for close to 30 years now. We've got 30 years worth of scientific data that show us how to retrofit towers appropriately. So, you know, the Passive House approach combines a set of well-tested techniques into a coherent whole approach, which can be applied to buildings in order to improve health, durability, comfort, energy efficiency. You know, but what are these techniques and how do we implement them? Let's take a look. First and foremost, Passive House, whether it be a retrofit or a new build, relies on super insulation, lots and lots and lots of cozy insulation. It requires an airtight construction, so that, and that's one of the ways we measure the efficiency of a building, the effectiveness of a building through blower door tests. So airtight construction, our buildings have to be thermal bridge free. We have to make sure the cold stays outside, the warmth stays inside. That we use high quality windows with solar orientation. So you've heard about Passive House windows, perhaps. They tend to be triple pane with really well thermal broken dividers within, low E glass and inert gas between those panels. It's solar orientation. It's not always possible, especially when you're dealing with a retrofit and that building is in place and we can't have much of an effect on it. So the fifth, of course, for Passive House, because we're doing such a good job of sealing these buildings, we have to have a really good ventilation system with heat recovery. So you put these 5 things together and you get a Passive House retrofit, or you get a Passive House new build. A new build to the Passive House standard is about 90% less energy. We'll use about 90% less energy than a comparable code built building. And retrofits, we're getting upwards of 70 to 75% less energy use than the building before we applied the Passive House retrofit to it. And the Passive House retrofit, the marketing department has decided to call it the Enerfit with a PH, the Enerfit program, and that's what we run with. So the Enerfit program is giving tall towers about 70 to 75% reduction in energy. So why build to the Passive House standard? Well, as I mentioned before, you have really good, healthy indoor air quality. So there's no mold. There's there's appropriate humidity within. There's good fresh air that's being brought in, so lower carbon dioxide levels inside the Passive House. This results in a very comfortable house and a very durable building. You know, you build Passive House to last 85 years, not the usual 25-year cycle where everything has to be gutted and thrown out. So durability is really key. Of course, you know, you do these things, you build for health, you build for comfort, you build for durability, and lo and behold, you get low energy or high energy efficiency, low energy use, high energy efficiency. You get GHG reductions because you're using far less fuel. And Passive House really promotes the use of electricity in those jurisdictions where electricity is clean. And of course, you get cost savings. If you're If your energy use is drastically reduced, then it costs you less to live in, to work in a passive house building. So there are some pathways to building decarbonization, tall towers or single families. You know, the question we ask and the challenge we put forward is where do we maximize our impact? We only have so much time. There's a finite amount of money. So how do we maximize the retrofits? And the answer for us has always been really the deep energy tower retrofits. It will help Canada reach its Paris Accord commitments. And among the towers, we really need to focus on residential towers, the post-war apartments that are the backbone of Canada's rental stock and provide affordable housing to millions of Canadians. And you know, we also work closely with the Toronto-based tower retrofit group. And one of their studies clearly outlined that there's about 10,000 towers across Canada that fit that target. So the question is, what needs to be done? Well, there's a number of things that can be done from our perspective. And although Pacifist works with all levels of government, we really focus a lot on municipalities, especially municipalities that don't have expertise in-house necessarily to figure out best policy, technical approaches, that kind of thing. Although I am proud to say we work closely with the City of Vancouver and the City of Toronto and their green building standards. Delighted to see what those two great cities are doing. So we know that municipalities, they need to have more authority to create retrofit bylaws and incentives on deep energy retrofits. Across Canada, the relationship between municipalities and the province may differ, but generally municipalities don't have enough authority in these areas. Even big cities like Toronto, with the Toronto Act, can have more control over its building code, but not necessarily its retrofit code. So, you know, how does a municipality create the best policy when its hands are tied? You know, it's imperative that provinces look at helping municipalities by giving them some more authority to create retrofit bylaws. When it comes to retrofits, you know, slapping a double pane window in and a little bit of insulation, it's just not enough. We've got to drive to that 70 to 75% reduction of energy and reduction of GHGs. So we need to have municipalities establish very high performance standards. And they need to be science-based standards and standards that we know we can get at. They can't be seen by the public to be simply greenwashing. They need to be science-based and they need to be proven. I think we need to provide the authority to staff to make decisions. So, you know, when we talk to people in the design, the building industry, they all too often find there's a disconnect between what council is talking about, what council is planning, but what authority staff have to actually implement. So a wonderful plan is only wonderful if staff, if you as a politician can clear the road and let staff get at it. There are too many instances of you know, where planning bylaws are not adequately tweaked or changed to allow staff to facilitate the development, the retrofit of high performance buildings. And of course, you know, we need to grow government tools to help fund retrofits, things like the carbon tax. That's imperative. There's some question about how the retrofits are paid for. How do we stimulate that? But there's all sorts of exciting work being done on the finance angle with private tower owners to make it happen. And financial institutions are slow on the uptake, but some of the more nimbler developers and building owners are developing ways of financing tower retrofits and, in fact, green buildings. I think that's going to accelerate rapidly as the financial world sees it being passed by nimbler financial institutions. So competition can be a good thing. So as I mentioned earlier, there are about 10,000 towers across Canada in need of deep energy retrofits. And the only way we're going to make a dent in our Paris Accord commitments is if government and business focus on these deep energy retrofits. I have nothing against retrofitting single family homes, but there simply isn't enough money or enough time to retrofit, all of the single family homes in Canada. And quite frankly, it doesn't make enough of a difference, I'm told by the scientists, to invest that kind of money in hundreds of thousands of single family homes across Canada when we have these towers that are really the low-hanging fruit. So the challenges for the public and private sectors is access funding and innovative insurance models as they go through this type of retrofit. The life cycle cost analysis, or the total cost of building ownership, is one way that building owners and government are being able to monetize the low carbon aspects of their buildings, and they're able to better secure financing and pass along that green aspect of the building to future purchasers. And we know that deep energy retrofits save 30 to 40% over code built when the total cost of building ownership is taken into consideration. So that's 30–40% of the cost of the building. So electrification and energy efficiency, and I know that, as I said earlier, that Pacifist is really focused on electrification of buildings. We absolutely have to move away from fossil fuels in space heating and water heating. And there are more and more products coming on the market for big buildings that can help us do that. So we need to be focused on health and comfort. But I will say one of the things I like about the Passive House standard is that it helps facilitate electrification, because the buildings are so efficient to begin with. You need very little space heating or cooling, for example, if you build to that very high standard. So it's easier to electrify when you build to that high standard. If I had a concern, it's the charge to electrify everything at a time where so many buildings are so inefficient that there's just not the capacity within our electrical grid to either create the electricity, to transmit the electricity, or to distribute the electricity in most parts of Canada. So while the move to electrification is a great thing and we need to continue pushing it, before we get there, we need to make sure our buildings are really efficient. So let me move along here. I'll give you an example. This is, I'll say that I should go back and take a second, because it really speaks to Ken Sobel Tower and the great work that ERA Architects and Hamilton Housing have done. The Passive House standard is really in big part, a product of work that was done in Canada back in the late 1970s. At that time, we had what was known as the oil crisis. Canada was an importer of oil from, and the oil exporting nations of the world got together and started to put the price of oil up. there was real concern with Canadian governments, provincially and federally, that how would Canadians keep their houses warm in the wintertime? Well, a very bright group of people in the federal government and with the Saskatchewan government took all of the building science to date and created the Saskatchewan Conservation House back in 1977. They tested all the new theories, heat recovery and ventilation systems, triple pane windows, super airtight buildings. All of this was known that long ago. And the Saskatchewan Conservation House became one of the models as Europe began looking in the 80s, in the 80s began looking for ways to reduce its energy consumption, most of which was imported as well. And they toured a number of buildings around the world. They talked to a number of scientists around the world, including Canada. And they took a lot of data home with them and examples home with them from the Saskatchewan Conservation House. And that building today is recognized by the Pacifist Institute as one of the founding buildings. It's not necessarily a passive house, but it's darn close, and it's 1977. So here in Canada, we should be proud of the fact that we've led the charge for many years to build highly efficient buildings. So I'll move forward. Single family residences, you know, we've been building those in Canada for a number of years. MERBs as well. Deep energy retrofits of towers presents an interesting challenge, but Canadians with our deep background have been sorting it out and figuring it out. And, you know, I present to you here today the Ken Sobel Tower, done with ERA Architects. This is the oldest high-rise residential building owned by City Housing Hamilton. It was retrofitted to meet the Passive House and Interfit standard after years of being in decline. So I should mention that those 10,000 towers I was talking about, they're right for an Interfit type approach right now. There is a lot of deferred maintenance. So money is going to have to be spent soon. Facades are failing, windows are leaking, balconies need replacing. So the owners of these buildings have to deal with a lot of stuff already. They might as well go a little bit further and do a deep energy retrofit while they're at it, you know, upgrade the boiler systems or replace the boiler systems with electrification, put good quality windows in, maybe get rid of the balconies because those usually create incredible thermal bridges. There's some exciting things that they can do, reclad the exterior of the building with lots of insulation, improved vapor barrier, water barriers. These are all things they have to do anyway. If they have to fix the facade, if they have to fix windows, balconies, etc., they might as well invest a little bit more and get it to at least the Interfit standard and enjoy that 70 to 75% energy reduction that comes with that deep energy retrofit. We look at this building, the Ken Sobel Tower, and the results will be a 94% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. It's an 18-story building, 80,000 square feet, and it's been totally modernized. We'll provide 146 units of affordable housing for seniors. And of course, it's located in Hamilton, Ontario. There's all sorts of information on the internet about Ken Sobel Tower. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in learning more, to read up on it, because it really speaks to the ability of Canadian architects, engineers, and contractors to make a difference. This building was designed, the retrofit was planned a certain way, but when they got into it, like so many projects, they completely had to do a 180 and really take a step back and quickly figure out how to approach this building. There was mold where they had not found mold in their tests, and some really nasty things happening. But you know, on the fly, they made incredible changes, and they used very simple techniques and technology to get this building to 94% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll say it speaks to another truth about deep energy retrofits. They're not rocket science. We know what to do. Our Canadian architects and engineers and building scientists are very smart people. They can figure this out. We're here to help them figure it out. And Efficiency Canada has all sorts of courses and expertise on the website to help people figure this out. I'm here to help encourage getting over the inertia and saying, you can do this. It's being done all over the world. It's being done here in Canada. We need government to do more of it, to support more of it, and we need building owners to get on board and recognize there's a financial opportunity to do this. So very quickly, Passive House, we're here to help with a standard, with education. Our website has all sorts of information. If you're interested in learning more about retrofitting to low energy or building to low energy, we've got some training, some education from you. I won't go through it anymore, other than to say thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Chris. I can tell by the number of questions we already have here that everyone enjoyed your presentation, and the chat was just going. Some people were making connections on the chat, which is always awesome to see. So happy to facilitate that networking that's going on there.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So before we open the floor to questions, I'd like to let everyone know that we do record these and we post them on our website under the Education tab. So if you joined us midway or are going to miss the Q&A, you can join us and watch the video. I know one of my colleagues actually listens to them as a podcast while he goes out walking, which I thought was a really great idea. So also a quick reminder, we do have one rule for the same rules we have for our presenters, and that's no sales pitches, please. And that includes any statements disguised as questions. So let's open the floor to questions. I see there's a number of votes on these happening this week. So we'll go to the first one with Brendan here. What is the best way to answer concerns regarding retrofits taking away affordable housing by making buildings, quote unquote, too good?
And I think what you're referring to is Passive House traditionally, or deep energy retrofits even in general, are seen to be a premium to cost too much. I think this is maybe where you're going with social housing. I'm not too sure. We've had discussions with social housing providers where they think there's a cost premium of going to a deep energy retrofit, and they worry that additional cost will take away from their ability to provide a few extra units in a development. But a number of studies have shown, and we at Passive House Canada anyway have and others. So City Hamilton City Hamilton Homes has done a recent study that really demonstrate if you build to and not to make an advertisement, I'm sorry, but they specifically asked the study to look at Passive House because they were using the Enerfit standard and the Passive House standard, and they found and this is something we've said for years, to build to Passive House is not a substantial amount of money. I think we're 2 or 3% right now. We just did a YWCA in Hamilton, a new build, but affordable housing that was about 2% more than say code built. But a couple of months of operational savings and that money disappears. So the additional cost to build to Passive House or I would say any other deep energy retrofit is no longer an excuse not to do it. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. I have a popular question here. I'm going to ask you, Chris, but I'm also going to throw out to everyone that's attending today that if you have answers to this question too, feel free to chime in by putting it on the chat channel as well. So Richard's actually wondering, does Passive House Canada have any case studies or rules of thumb that highlight or indicate the relationship between increased retrofit costs to passive house standards compared to the resulting lowered operating costs? So just what you're kind of talking about.
That's it. You got it. And it's not even our case study. And there's more than one. The Ken Sobel Tower is an example. There's lots of work you can find through ERA or the Tower Retrofit group. City Hamilton released a study that is similar, looking at comparing a variety of different standards and outcomes and costs, and concluded that passive house was 2 or 3% more, and more. That is that's what we're getting across Canada. So if anybody wants to, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll root around and find the appropriate studies for you.
Definitely, and I know people are adding to them to the chat as well, so that's great to see.
Great, so, good to see.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a question here from Peter. Is despite the declaring climate emergencies, many municipalities across Canada seem quite comfortable with urban sprawl and car-centric urban planning. So how can addressing Canada's retrofit challenge also support intensification efforts? Is there room for the passive house standard to address population density?
Wow. This is a passion of mine. Personally, this is a passion of mine. I was a town councillor in an area of Canada that is undergoing incredible urban sprawl and gobbling up farmland to put single family residences. I've been involved with urban planning and densification along transit routes. I will even admit to at one point in my career being a Minister of Environment and Climate Change. So this is near and dear to my heart. Urban planning isn't per se baked into the passive house standard, but passive house will not exist without good urban planning and without the tools, without municipalities being equipped with the best tools. So, part of my discussion with municipalities all the time is to get their urban planning, their building, their planning bylaws aligned and in order. And quite frankly, to the communities that talk to us, it's all part of what they need to do. We've seen some good work in BC with provincial-wide guide for urban planners on how to work with the STEP code to develop the necessary bylaws. And we're right now, and I know there's at least one other organization, we're looking at developing a guide for Canadian municipalities to reduce barriers to adopting low carbon buildings within their municipalities. But within the PHI standard per se, we don't talk about transportation. We don't talk about urban sprawl, but our practitioners are very passionate about densification, about building sustainable communities. And that's been my message from day one as well.
Yeah, definitely. I would say it's they're very closely aligned for sure.
Absolutely.
I have a question here, kind of follow up to that from Stephen, is can you provide an example of a municipality retrofit bylaw that's needed?
Do I have an example of a really good one? Vancouver's doing some really good work on retrofit, and they will be even doing more in the near future. Toronto is delving into retrofits, but again, we run into municipalities where their hands are tied. They have provincial responsibility. They've been given, in many cases, provincial responsibility to develop new build bylaws. So you have the local building bylaw. But when it comes to retrofits, there's not as much they can do. If you are retrofitting a tower in some municipalities, other than does it meet the code as you retrofit it, or the existing building code as you retrofit it, that's about as far as you can go. We need to do a lot more. This is where we need the provinces to encourage municipalities, to give municipalities the tools they need to create more stringent retrofits. It creates all sorts of questions, and I'm asked them all the time. At one point, do more stringent retrofit codes kick in if someone in a residence is just replacing windows, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I usually say that we've got some really smart people out there who work in planning, who work in urban planning, and work in buildings. They can figure this out.
Yes, that is true. I also dare say a few of what you said might be part of the scorecard that's coming out, which is going to actually have a webinar in 2 weeks, so on November 18th.
Yeah,
so I'll throw a teaser out for that.
Oh, I really look forward to the scorecard.
Yes.
We use it. We use it in our communications and when we're out visiting with governments.
Awesome. That's fantastic. That's why we do it, for others to use. So there's a great question here actually from Joshua, is any thoughts or comments on how we make this equitable for all parts of the country? So definitely different climate conditions that make some retrofits, example, heat pumps, more challenging in northern communities, at least with current technology.
Mm-hmm. It speaks to the broader issue of a just recovery and how we how we make sure that all parts of Canada can take advantage of deep energy retrofits and better buildings. Government policy is what's required. We work with a few First Nation communities, and personally, I spent about 25 years working with First Nation communities in our far north. I've seen the condition of housing in these communities, and it's should be a national shame, quite frankly, and it is a national shame that so many First Nations people are forced to live in conditions that you and I in Southern Canada would not tolerate. Having said that, I'd have to think through exactly what type of policies we need to make it easier and less expensive to build in the north. But it certainly is one that the government needs to take the lead to make sure that it's, this type of building is not just something that happens in the south. And we are working in northern BC and First Nation communities, building some really great passive houses and MURBs, those sorts of things. So it can be done. We just have to make sure that we have we have the trained people who can build or retrofit to this in the north. And this is one of the just transitions we like to talk about, that it's not difficult to teach tradespeople how to build or how to renovate to retrofit to these high standards. I mean, our course is like 3 days. So it's not a big deal, but it requires government thinking and government policy. There's not been enough of that in the years gone by.
So I know you and we and a number of others are working on that, or pushing for it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I found this really interesting question is one of the barriers we hear about is a lack of availability of materials in Alberta, but I would say that's right across the country, to build a passive house or to retrofit. So is this an actual barrier or a perceived barrier? Like, what's the current state of the supply chain for passive house components?
Yeah, well, we know to build, period. This whole world pandemic seems to have thrown the supply chain of all building products out of whack. So we hear from people who are building the passive house and the rest that it's a problem. This is one of the opportunities. If you're ordering all of your high performance components from Europe, you've got to plan that out months ahead. It's always been that way though, but now you've got to take that into consideration. But I'm pleased to say we have at least 8 high performance window manufacturers in Canada now that can provide passive house standard windows. And a number of others who haven't had their windows certified, but they're very close to passive house. We don't have enough ventilation systems, heat exchange ventilation systems being manufactured in Canada. But so there can be some lag, right? So there is some accuracy when we talk about passive house components. But I'll tell you something, you know, one of the founders, one of the developers of the Saskatchewan Conservation House, a chap by the name of Harold Orr, who has received the Order of Canada for the work he's done around energy and houses. Harold is in his 90s, and he does something called the jokingly referred to as the prairie chainsaw renovation, where he takes single family homes and renovates, you know, he cuts off the east trough. The first time they did it, they used a chainsaw, but he says now they're a little more exacting. But everything he uses, you know, he can buy at his local home hardware store, except for the doors and the windows that he can now buy from a bunch of providers across Canada. None of the stuff he does is super fancy. You know, I look at the tapes he uses on the exteriors, and they're not necessarily the prescribed passive house tapes, but his renovations are lasting 50 years, and they're drastically driving down the amount of energy these single family residents are using in, he's based in Saskatchewan. So, you know, and Ken Sobel Tower is a perfect example. It used really basic materials. You know, it used rock wool insulation. It used 2x4s, real simple stuff. Not really crazy.
I'm curious, Chris, does Passive House Canada have a list of Canadian manufacturers on your website?
We do, Canadian manufacturers and suppliers. We've got that on our website.
Perfect.
And we also on our website, on the public side of the website, have a resource page about doing retrofits. So not only do we have some information about Canada, we've got, you know, a few dozen links to really good resources for people who want to learn more.
That's perfect. Thanks for that. Because that's fantastic to hear. Always made local, right?
Yes, that's the deal, right? We've got to create good paying jobs here in Canada. The Toronto Community Housing Corporation has chosen the Interfit model for 200 mid to high rise towers that it's going to be doing a deep energy retrofit on. And, you know, our estimate is they should be getting 70 to 75% energy reduction on those buildings. The first tranche of buildings will require 200,000 passive house quality windows. They may not be certified passive house. We've been working with them and with Fenestration Canada to develop a standard. 200,000 windows in their first go at it. If I was a Canadian window manufacturer, I'd be paying attention.
Yeah, definitely. So if anyone's here, or if you know anyone, let them know the time is now.
Yeah, call us or call Fen Canada, and let's get working on this, because this is huge. You know, the millions of windows that are going to be required, those high quality windows that are going to be required, is breathtaking, let alone the new innovation that's coming to Canada by way of panelization and modular development. You know, the retrofit of these towers is going to drive a whole new industry. The only way to be able to do it is through panelization, we believe. And so we're working with, we're looking at, we're encouraging, we're working with those companies in Canada and companies that want to come and invest in Canada to bring their factories here.
Good. That's great. I have nothing more to add to that. That's fantastic to hear. I'm just noticing the time, so I know there's a ton of questions left. So feel free to info@passiveHouseCanada.com. You can ask Chris and his team. Very well educated, knowledgeable, fantastic, friendly team that he has. And thank you again, Chris, for joining us. For those that are joining us next week, our friends that are joining us are actually from Daikin Applied Americas, as Philip Johnson, who's going to speak at the future of refrigerants. So that should be an interesting one as well to follow up on this as well, because that's also equally as important in this whole retrofit for sure.
Good stuff.
So again, thanks for joining us, Chris. Thanks everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Take care, and I'll see you next Friday.